Were you drinking that night?
Yes.
How much?
Enough to be drunk.
So you were drunk. A lot of people are going to say, Deborah, you were drunk that night. Is there any chance you did anything that hurt your daughter that you're just not telling us?
No. And if I thought there was a chance, I'd say it. No. I don't think that alcohol changes a person enough to do something like that.
This is not just another crime story. It is one of the most disturbing cases to ever unfold in the heart of America. A story that made parents double-check the locks on their doors and linger longer at their children's cribs. A case so chilling that even today, more than a decade later, it still sends a shiver down the spine of Kansas City. But Lisa's disappearance is not the only tragedy we will revisit tonight. You are about to hear how two different families, one in Missouri, one in North Dakota, lost everything. Two stories separated by years and miles, yet bound together by a single thread. The failure of a system that was supposed to protect the most vulnerable among us. The first is the story of baby Lisa Irwin, a 10-month-old girl with bright blue eyes and a smile that lit up her small world, who disappeared without a trace on a quiet autumn night. The second is the horrific case of little Mecca Carrillo, only 15 months old, whose final days were marked by pain no child should ever endure. These are not tales told for shock alone. They are warnings. They are reminders of how quickly safety can unravel, and how silence from those meant to act can become deadly. So before we begin, take a moment, subscribe to this channel, share this story, and let your voice join the fight to keep children safe. To understand the tragedy of October 3rd, 2011, we need to step inside the modest house on North Lister Avenue in Kansas City, Missouri. At first glance, it looked like any other family home on the block, neighbors greeting one another, children playing in the yard, adults sipping coffee on their porches. But behind that ordinary facade, cracks were already beginning to show. The mother was 25-year-old Deborah Bradley. Legally, she was still married to a military man named Sean Bradley, though they were no longer living together. The reason they hadn't divorced was painfully simple. A divorce cost $300, and they couldn't afford it. That small detail revealed more about their financial struggle than words ever could. Poverty ran deep, and with it came instability. Deborah's personality didn't help. Friends described her as someone who craved attention, a woman who would make a scene in public, who shifted moods quickly, who seemed desperate to be seen and noticed. Social media became her stage. Every drink, every party, every laugh was posted online for the world to witness. Even on the very day everything changed, October 3rd, Deborah took multiple selfies, glass of wine in hand. Her priorities were clear to some. Attention and indulgence first, responsibility second. Yet at the same time, she was also seen as a loving mother. Friends admitted she doted on her children and often spoke about how much they completed her. This contradiction, party-loving but motherly, would become a haunting theme in the story of her missing child. The father was 29-year-old Jeremy Irwin, an electrician. He had a son, Blake, from a previous marriage. Blake lived with him full-time after his mother lost custody in 2008. Jeremy was known as a hard worker, often taking overtime shifts, arriving home exhausted but still trying to be present for his children. Together, Jeremy and Deborah had built what looked like a typical family, 2 boys and, finally, their baby girl, Lisa. Lisa Renee Irwin was born on November 11, 2010. She was blonde, with striking blue eyes and a small birthmark on her right thigh. She had just 2 tiny baby teeth and was beginning to mimic the movements of her older brothers, who lovingly nicknamed her Pumpkin Pie. She adored bananas and spaghetti, and each night she cuddled a glowing toy worm as she drifted off to sleep beneath her car's blanket and a cluster of Barney plush animals. For her parents, Lisa was the one who made their family feel complete. Deborah once said, "She's the one who finished us." But beneath that sense of completion were troubling signs. Just a week before Lisa vanished, neighbors reported a suspicious man loitering near playgrounds in the area. Thin, about average height, in his 40s. They called the police, but nothing was done. No arrest, no serious follow-up, just a note in a case file. Around the same time, Child Protective Services received an anonymous complaint about the family. The caller worried about the baby's safety, claiming the little girl often cried through the night and that something about the parents seemed off. The complaint was logged, but the visit was delayed, postponed again, and eventually forgotten. No one realized it then, but these missed opportunities, ignored warnings, delayed investigations, would soon make the difference between safety and a nightmare. Because Lisa, the smiling baby who lit up her family's world, would soon disappear into the shadows. October 3rd, 2011, began like any other Monday in the Irwin household. That afternoon around 2:30 p.m., Jeremy came home for lunch. He sat with the children, shared a meal, and for a short while, everything seemed peaceful. But no one could have guessed that those ordinary moments would become the last happy memories before the nightmare unfolded. At around 4:30 p.m., Deborah went shopping at Festival Foods with her brother, Philip. Cameras recorded her buying diapers, baby food, and a $40 box of wine. For a family living paycheck to paycheck, a family that couldn't spare $300 for a divorce, $40 spent on alcohol was telling. To many, this purchase would later become symbolic of misplaced priorities, a detail that cast doubt on Deborah's instincts as a mother. By 5:30 p.m., Jeremy left for his night shift at Starbucks. It was the first time in a long while that he had worked overnight, leaving Deborah alone with the children. That same night, Child Protective Services, who had already received an anonymous call expressing concern about Lisa's welfare, did nothing. The visit had been postponed again, the case pushed aside, leaving the Irwin home unguarded. At 6:40 p.m., Deborah put baby Lisa to bed. She dressed her in purple shorts and a t-shirt with white kittens printed on it. The baby curled up with her blanket and drifted into sleep. By all appearances, it was a normal bedtime routine, but this was the last time anyone could confirm seeing Lisa alive. Around 7 p.m., neighbor Samantha Brando came over with her 4-year-old daughter. They sat on the porch with Deborah, smoked cigarettes, and opened the box of wine. Glass after glass disappeared, the bottle draining quickly. Deborah later admitted she drank anywhere from 5 to 10 glasses, though she couldn't remember exactly. By the end of the night, both women had emptied the entire box. As the evening stretched on, Deborah's memory blurred. She claimed she checked on Lisa again at 10 p.m., but later contradicted herself, saying maybe she hadn't looked after 6:40. In one version of events, she peeked into the room. In another, she admitted she never did. Alcohol clouded everything, and the truth became slippery. Samantha left around 10:30. Deborah said she went to bed shortly after, though she couldn't recall if she locked the doors, turned off the lights, or even checked on her children. The older son slept in his room, while the younger crawled into Deborah's bed. Exhaustion mixed with wine, and soon the house sank into silence. But in that silence, something horrifying took place. At 4:00 a.m., Jeremy returned from work. From the moment he stepped inside, something felt wrong. The front door was unlocked, highly unusual for Deborah, who was meticulous about locking up when he worked nights. Several lights were still on in the kitchen and hallways, another odd detail. In the computer room, the window screen looked as if someone had tampered with it, yet there were no clear signs of a break-in. Jeremy went to check on the children. The boys were safe, one in his bed, the other asleep beside Deborah, who lay unconscious from exhaustion and alcohol. At the foot of the bed sat something odd, a stray cat. The family didn't own a cat. How it had entered the house remained another bizarre mystery. Finally, Jeremy opened Lisa's door. The crib was empty. His daughter was gone. Panic seized him. He searched the house, the closets under the beds. Nothing. He shook Deborah awake, shouting, "Where's Lisa?" But she was too groggy to understand. As the reality sank in, they ran outside, calling the baby's name into the night. She was only 10 months old. She couldn't have gone far. But she didn't answer. Then came another shock. All 3 of the family's cell phones were missing. The only way they managed to call 911 was by using Jeremy's work phone. That night, the ordinary home on North Lister Avenue transformed into a crime scene, and Lisa Irwin became the center of one of America's most haunting mysteries. When police arrived in the early morning hours of October 4th, flashing lights filled the neighborhood. Officers combed through the house, the yard, the surrounding streets. For the first few hours, there was still hope. Maybe Lisa had wandered off. Maybe she was nearby. But as the minutes passed, that hope began to wither. What investigators discovered raised even more questions than answers. The family dog, and the neighbor's dogs too, had not barked that night. Usually they reacted to the smallest disturbance, but on this night, silence ruled. It was as if whoever entered the house was either familiar to the animals or knew exactly how to keep them quiet. Then came the phone records. At 11:57 p.m., just before midnight, one of the missing cell phones made a call lasting 50 seconds. The number belonged to Megan Wright, who denied ever answering the phone. But Wright's neighbor, a man known by the nickname Jersey, had a long criminal history, including burglaries and incidents near daycare centers. The call connecting to someone linked to him seemed like more than coincidence. Witnesses added fuel to the fire. Around 2:30 a.m., a man was spotted walking down the street holding a child in his arms. The child was lightly dressed despite the cold October night. Another witness saw what looked like the same man emerging from woods near a gas station with a baby. That same night, a fire broke out in a dumpster nearby. Inside, firefighters found burned children's clothes, ashes too far gone for DNA testing. The possibility that these clothes belonged to Lisa was horrifying. Yet despite these leads, the investigation shifted focus. After just 2 days, police canceled the Amber Alert, suggesting they no longer expected to find the baby alive. Instead of pursuing every possible tip, detectives zeroed in on Deborah. Her story kept changing. First she said she checked on Lisa at 10 less, then admitted she might not have looked in after 6:40. First she claimed 1 or 2 glasses of wine, then confessed it might have been 5, maybe 10. Her inconsistencies fueled suspicion. When she was interrogated, observers noticed something unsettling. Deborah occasionally laughed. Out of place, inappropriate, almost bizarre. She later agreed to a polygraph test, which police announced she failed. Deborah insisted she was being framed, but public opinion split down the middle. Some believed she was a grieving mother under unfair scrutiny. Others saw her as the prime suspect in her own daughter's disappearance. And through all of this, the critical first 48 hours slipped away. Search teams dwindled, leads grew cold, and the possibility of finding Lisa alive began to vanish. The system that was supposed to protect her seemed paralyzed, more focused on proving guilt than rescuing a child. What happened in the days following Lisa's disappearance revealed something darker than a single crime. It revealed how an entire system designed to protect children could collapse at every level. Child Protective Services had received an anonymous tip about Lisa before she vanished. A neighbor worried that the baby cried too often at night, that something in the home didn't feel right. But instead of acting swiftly, the case was postponed, first to the following week, then to the following month, until it was simply forgotten. By the time Lisa disappeared, no one from the agency had ever followed up. Police, too, ignored warning signs. Neighbors had reported a suspicious man wandering near playgrounds just a week earlier. The description matched the man later linked to Deborah's phone records, Jersey, a known offender with a history of trespassing and breaking into homes. Yet officers brushed it aside, citing not enough evidence. That negligence left the neighborhood exposed to a predator. And then came the Amber Alert. In the most crucial hours, the first 48, when a child's chance of survival is highest, law enforcement abruptly canceled the alert after only 2 days. The message was devastating. The authorities were no longer expecting to find Lisa alive. Instead of pouring resources into search efforts, they focused their energy on interrogating Deborah. For up to 10 hours a day, she sat under harsh questioning, while outside, fewer and fewer people combed the woods, the streets, the vacant lots. Even the media, who might have pressured the investigation to act faster, became part of the problem. Journalists paid neighbors for exclusive interviews. Television shows turned Lisa's disappearance into ratings fodder. Coverage shifted from finding a missing baby to dissecting the mother's every expression, every past mistake. Meanwhile, Lisa's room remained untouched, her Barney toys and glowing worm waiting for a child who never returned. More than a decade has passed since that night, and the case remains cold. No arrests, no answers, just lingering questions. Was it an abduction, an accident covered up, or something even more sinister? The most haunting part is this. Lisa should be a teenager today, laughing with her brothers, navigating school, living a life that was stolen before it even began. Instead, the silence around her case reminds us how fragile safety is, and how quickly it can vanish when those entrusted to protect it fail. The disappearance of Lisa Irwin left behind nothing but questions, cold files, and a family torn apart by suspicion. A child vanished into thin air, and the world moved on without answers. But Lisa's story is not an isolated tragedy. It is part of a much larger pattern, one where children slip through the cracks of a system that is supposed to guard them. Because nearly a decade later, in another quiet American city, history repeated itself in an even more brutal form. This time, it wasn't a mystery of a child stolen from her crib. It was a horror carried out in plain sight, inside the home of someone the family trusted completely. Her name was Mecca Carrillo, a bright-eyed, healthy 15-month-old baby girl from Fargo, North Dakota. She was chubby-cheeked, cheerful, and known for showering her family with hugs and kisses. Mecca lived with her aunt Amanda, who raised her as if she were her own daughter. The little girl filled their home with laughter, babbling her first words, playing with her cousins, lighting up every room she entered. And then came Brandy Adele, a woman who had been part of the family's life for over 5 years. She was considered a close friend, even like a sister. Amanda trusted her so much that she often left the children in Adele's care. Who else could be safer than someone you've known for half a decade? But behind the familiar smile was something unimaginable. When Amanda allowed Adele to take Mecca for a few days, it seemed harmless. In reality, it was the beginning of 3 weeks of torment that would shock even seasoned detectives. October 2020 should have been an ordinary, joyful time for 15-month-old Mecca Carrillo. She was living with her Aunt Amanda in Moorhead, Minnesota, after her biological parents could no longer care for her. Amanda adored the little girl, treating her not as a burden, but as her own child. Their home was full of cousins, warmth, and laughter. Mecca was a healthy baby who had already started babbling words like bye-bye and da-da. She was known for giving hugs freely, reaching out to every adult she saw, as though she didn't believe evil existed in the world. Into this circle of trust stepped Brandy Adele, Amanda's longtime friend of more than 5 years. Adele was present at family gatherings, holidays, and milestones. Amanda often relied on her for childcare, certain that no one could be safer for her children than a woman she considered family. But behind that facade of loyalty, Adele harbored darkness no one suspected. On October 28th, just days before Halloween, Adele offered to take Mecca for a short stay. She promised to give the child a fun Halloween celebration. Amanda agreed without hesitation, packing Mecca's favorite toys and pajamas. It was supposed to be a harmless weekend with a trusted friend. Instead, it became the beginning of 3 weeks of unspeakable cruelty. From the moment Adele took Mecca into her Fargo apartment, the home turned into a chamber of torture. Day after day, the toddler was beaten with blunt objects, leaving bruises and fractures across her tiny body. Adele poured chemicals onto her skin, burning her delicate flesh. Neighbors later admitted they heard crying, but dismissed it as a child's tantrums. They never imagined the truth, that a baby was being systematically abused within those walls. What followed was even more horrifying. Adele subjected Mecca to sexual abuse, atrocities so vile that even seasoned detectives struggled to comprehend them. She forced the toddler to drink alcohol, watching as her small throat burned and her stomach twisted in agony. Mecca's laughter, once the soundtrack of Amanda's home, was replaced by weak cries and desperate sobs. As the days turned into weeks, Mecca's condition deteriorated. Her once bright eyes dulled, her strength waned. By mid-November, her body was covered in bruises, burns, and scars. She no longer cried loudly. She had no energy left. On November 19th, she was already dying. Adele, aware of the child's critical state, did not stop. Instead, she prepared for what would become the final act of cruelty. On November 20th, Adele placed Mecca into a bathtub filled with water and left her there for 2 hours. Too weak to lift her head, the toddler slipped beneath the surface. When Adele returned, Mecca was unresponsive, her skin bluish, her tiny chest no longer rising. In panic, Adele tried to revive her by hitting and pinching her, but it was far too late. At 10:44 p.m., she finally called for an ambulance, claiming it was an accident. Medics rushed Mecca to the hospital, but the truth was obvious. The child's body bore the marks of systematic torture, fresh wounds beside half-healed ones, chemical burns, broken bones, and evidence of sexual assault. For 4 days, machines kept her alive, but her brain had been irreparably damaged by lack of oxygen. On November 24th, the family made the heart-wrenching decision to remove life support. Mecca's short life ended after only 456 days on Earth. The autopsy was so gruesome that prosecutors warned the family not to read it. "It will change you forever," one detective told Amanda. Even the assistant district attorney refused to describe the injuries in open court, saying, "When I usually say injuries from head to toe, it's metaphorical. In this case, it's literal." Adele was arrested nearly 2 months later and charged with murder and child abuse. She initially claimed it had all been a tragic mistake, but eventually pleaded guilty. In December 2021, the court sentenced her to 30 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25. For many, the sentence felt outrageously light compared to the horror she inflicted. The most shocking moment of the trial, however, came not from Adele, but from Mecca's father, Manuel Carrillo. Imprisoned at the time of his daughter's death, he was allowed to attend court. When given the chance to speak, he stunned the courtroom by asking the judge for mercy. "Her life is still worth something," he said, referring to Adele. "I forgive her, but I will never forget what she did." His words divided the public. Some saw them as an act of unimaginable grace, others as a betrayal of justice. For Amanda, who had raised Mecca as her own, the loss was unbearable. She returned home to a house that felt empty, to the sound of her other children's laughter, missing the voice that should have been there. "It hurts every time I walk through the door," she said. "It hurts every time I hear them laugh, because one laugh is missing, hers." 2 stories, 2 children. Lisa Irwin, who vanished into the night without a trace, and Mecca Carrillo, whose final days were stolen by the very person her family trusted most. One case remains a mystery, the other left a courtroom in shock, yet both reveal the same truth. Innocence is fragile, and when those entrusted to protect it fail, the cost is unbearable. Lisa should be a teenager today. She should be in high school, laughing with her friends, maybe planning her future. Instead, her room remains frozen in time, a shrine to a baby who never came home. Mecca should be in kindergarten, learning her letters, filling her home with joy. Instead, her family carries the weight of silence, the sound of a laugh that will never return. What is most terrifying is not only the crimes themselves, but the cracks that allowed them to happen. Neighbors reported warnings, agencies received complaints, police knew predators roamed nearby, and yet action was delayed, ignored, or abandoned. By the time urgency arrived, it was already too late. If it could happen to Lisa, if it could happen to Mecca, it can happen anywhere. And that is why we tell these stories, not for shock alone, but as a call to awareness, to remind every parent to listen to instincts, every neighbor to report suspicions, every official to take warnings seriously. Because the smallest missed detail can mean the difference between life and loss. We speak for those who no longer can. Share this story. Subscribe to this channel. Let these voices, though silenced, echo through us. Their lives mattered. Their stories must not be forgotten.